بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول النبي الكريم. Understanding that Aisha is getting later and later, inshallah, we will try to change the class timing accordingly, inshallah, and minimize it so it doesn't take too long, inshallah. Today we continue on with Hajj, and we're mentioning the things related to Hajj. And this also not only applies to Hajj, but also applies to Umrah. This mic is... So this also applies to Umrah and those who go for Umrah and the crimes that a person commits in Umrah as well, right? Meaning in the state of Ihram. Essentially, these are mistakes that people make in the state of Ihram. So it's not only related to Hajj, but more so Ihram. So he says, Babul Jinaya. This is the chapter regarding to the mistakes. إذا تطيب المحرم فعليه الكفارة. So the first type of mistake that a person can commit, which is probably the most common, is wearing fragrances, right? Adopting fragrances, that's something which is very common, right? فَعَلَيْهِ الْكَفَّارَةِ. That person must give an expiation. فَإِن تَطَيَّبَ عُضًّا كَامِلًا فَمَا زَادَ فَعَلَيْهِ دَمٌ. Right? So before we move on, essentially there are three types of kafara, three types of expiations, right? One is if you commit a big mistake. There are not that many big mistakes, but if you do commit a big mistake, then you have to sacrifice a big animal, like for example, a cow or a camel or something like that, right? So that's the biggest mistake, right? Then you have the second type of mistake, also a pretty big mistake. You would need to sacrifice a goat, sheep, smaller animal, right? And then there's a third type of mistake where if a person, again, the examples will come, but essentially the third option is, or the third type of mistake a person can make is wherein a person would have to give sadaqatul fitr amount, right? Sadaqatul fitr amount, which is in Saudi, it's around 13 riyals, more or less, right? About $3-4, whatever, about $4, let's say. But essentially about 13 riyals you have to give if you make those kind of mistakes. And we'll go through them, inshallah. So moving on. So if someone applies fragrance and they apply it to one full limb. So for example, a full hand, the full hand is submersed in that fragrance. So for example, let's say they dip their hand in some soapy water, the soap which had fragrance, they dip their hand inside that, for example, the entire hand, right? Which is common. Or they dip their foot or something. In that case, فَعَلَيْهِ dam. Then you must give dam. Dam is the animal, the smaller animal, meaning goat, sheep, whatever else it is, right? وَإِن تَطَيِّبَ أَقَلَّ مِنْ عُضْ فَعَلَيْهِ صَدَقَةً. And if someone touches less than a full limb, then they have to give sadaqah. And so this can happen, for example, you're passing by, as I say all the time, mistakes like these can happen very easily, right? You touch soap, for example. It only touches one part of your hand, not the entire hand, but a part of your hand, right? And so then you would have to give sadaqah for that. This can also, as I mentioned as well, that the Kaaba is heavily scented. I also mentioned that the Hajar al-Aswad is also heavily scented. So, I mean, realistically, it's unlikely that your hand will or the fragrance will transfer, right? Because by the time all the thousands of people they touch it, it's likely that there's no real fragrance on your hands, right? But even then, you should check to make sure that if there's any fragrance. But just be careful. Now, why they put fragrance on the Kaaba, whereas they only allow people supposedly in the state of Ihram to enter in the Mataf area, I don't know, right? But that's the reality, that if a person does touch anything that's fragranced, including the Kaaba, then they must give sadaqah, right? Okay. وَإِن لَبِسَ ثَوْبًا مُخَيَّطًا or مخيطا أو غطى رأسه يوما كاملا فعليه دم وإن كان أقل من ذلك فعليه صدقة, right? So he says that if someone wears stitched clothing or they cover their head for a full day meaning 12 hours, let's say 12 hours, right? In that case, then they have to give dam, right? And if it's less than the full day, then they have to give sadaqah. Okay, so for example, someone is let's say this happens often as well, like someone wants to wear a mask in the state of ihram, right? If you want to wear a mask in the state of ihram, you can, but if you wear it for full 12 hours, then you have to give dam, which most people don't do, right? Most people are not wearing masks for 12 hours, right? Most people, they wear masks maybe for an hour, for example, a couple of hours, right? And so in that case, they would have to give sadaqah, okay? Um, so that's that. And sadaqah for each half day, essentially. So for example, let's say someone wears it for, a couple of hours in the afternoon, and then a couple of hours at night, right? In that case, they would have to give sadaqah for separately for the afternoon and separately for the night. So these are the two different timings. So each time the day or night passes then, and they wear the mask in the state of ihram, then they must give sadaqah. So generally what I recommend, for example, if someone is going for umrah and they're sensitive to dust and allergies and other things, no? In that case, I recommend if you need to wear the mask, wear the mask, but obviously only wear it for a couple of hours, and try not to wear it for obviously 12 hours, right? And at most, for example, wear it for 10 hours, for example, and then when you're separate, when you're alone, then take it off. This not only applies to masks, but this applies to, for example, someone needs to wear some type of stitched clothing, right? Sometimes people, they feel uncomfortable without wearing underwear or something like that. That's also something else, right? Now, if someone has a genuine excuse to wear, undergarments, for example, that's a different story, right? If someone has, for example, they have to wear something underneath, or they need to wear something, then in that case, there can be exceptions. But in general cases, someone does not have a reason, then they should not be wearing stitched clothing. Any questions so far? If they do anything less than 12 hours, sadaqah, which is 13 riyals, for each half day that passes. And if it's more than 12 hours, then they should give dam, right? So someone is wearing underwear, for example, for 12 hours plus. In that case, they would have to give dam, right? But if that's really the case, then they should wear, if they need to for some reason. Again, they're not like, it's not shar'an, it's not a genuine reason. It's just maybe uncomfortability or whatever else it is. In that case, they would have to give, they should wear it for a couple of hours. They can wear it for a couple of hours, but then just give sadaqah afterwards. وإن حلق ربع رأسه فصاعدا فعليه دم. So if someone, they shave, one second. If they shave 1/4 of their head or more, if you shave 1/4 of your head or more, so you didn't complete the rituals of ihram, for example, right? And then you shave. In that case, you have to give dam. Anything above 1/4. So 1/4 is generally about the size of your palm. This is 1/4, right? So you have to give dam. وإن حلق أقل من الربع. If you shave or trim less than 1/4, then you must give sadaqah. Okay. So, for example, let's say someone starts trimming. In that case, they would have to give sadaqah. I remember I said this before as well, but a couple of years ago, maybe I was doing umrah. I finished my second umrah. I was bald, right? And I finished my second umrah, and I thought to myself, okay, why go to the barber? I'll just do it myself. I have a razor, so I'll just do it myself. I went to the hotel, go in the bathroom, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me put some water and let me put some soap. Soap is nice and easy, and it'll be simpler for me to shave my head. And the soap was scented, So I touched, it touched my hand. Then I realized, I was like, subhanallah, there's a reason why I was not using soap. So you're supposed to shave first, and then obviously you can touch soap, right? But you can't touch scented products before you shave. So everyone makes mistakes, right? Even people who teach, the rules of Hajj and Umrah, we also make mistakes. So, question?
Yes, so regarding the sadaqah, like say, you have to do immediately, or can you do like next day?
Yeah.
What is the timeline?
There's no real timeline. It's necessary for you to give it. Whether you give it today, tomorrow, day after, it doesn't matter, but you must give it. Right?
But you have to give it while you are there, right?
Not necessarily. Ideally, it's you should give it while you're there, obviously. If you come back and then you realize you made a mistake, then you can arrange for someone to give it there as well on your behalf, But ideally, if it's a mistake, you should, fix it as soon as possible. And that's why I always, there are many people, they come back and then they ask me. They say, like, Imam Sahib, I made a mistake. I did this, I did that, whatever. And I say, okay, I mean, you have to do X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3. So there are many things. But if you make a mistake, you should speak to a scholar immediately, right? And speak to a scholar that knows what they're talking about, right? Sometimes there are more lenient options, and sometimes there are other options which a more learned scholar can give you, whereas others may not be able to give you. So speak to someone who knows what they're talking about. Yeah.
Suppose you wear a mask, you didn't know then, but you learn a year later. Then what?
Give sadaqah.
So
Yeah. So for example, when I went in COVID, we were required to wear a mask, right? So although it was a government mandate, we still give sadaqah. After every single umrah, we give sadaqah. Why? Because we're wearing a mask. There's no shari'i requirement. There's no shari'i mandate, right? Islam is not mandating it. The Saudi government was mandating it. So, we still have to give sadaqah. So we give sadaqah. It's not that, it's not that much anyway. It's $3, $4, whatever else it is. It's not bad.
sadaqah you can give wherever you don't have to send back to.
Yes, so sadaqah technically, which we'll talk about inshallah, but yes, you can give sadaqah to any eligible poor person. So meaning same conditions of zakat. The person who's, Muslim, the person who's, um, who has below nisab and so on. Yeah, so it's the same as sadaqatul fitr, which is in Saudi, it's about 13 riyals. Are you trying to get a discount? No, 13 riyals is generally a good estimate. Does the dam have to be in Mecca? If so, how should one arrange it? Yeah, I mean, yes, the dam should be in Mecca. And the way to arrange it is, if you have some contacts, great, which I assume you don't. I think the Saudi government has an option as well. I'm not sure, to be honest. But there are many, many groups that arrange it, right? So, for example, we have our own contacts as well, and I know a bunch of reliable ulama who also do it there as well. In the past, I used to have a friend who lived in Jeddah. So I would just tell him that, listen, this person or that person, they need it. So can you just arrange for it? But there are many reliable scholars that, I can connect anyone who needs, to fulfill something, I can connect you with them and they can, you can coordinate with them. I won't take any fees or any middleman or anything like that. But anyways, yes, so you have to absolve or correct mistakes. Okay, so essentially 1/4 of the head is considered your head, right? So that's why, for example, in wudu, it's necessary for us to do masah of 1/4 of the head, right? It's necessary for us to do masah of 1/4 of the head because that's considered the fard amount. And so therefore, here as well, if you shave more than 1/4 or you trim more than 1/4, then that means that you are now cutting a majority or a good portion of the head. And so therefore, you would have to give dam. Anything less than that, so you cut, let's say you trim or shave a little bit, for example, and then you realize, then you have to give sadaqah. وإن حلق موضع الحجامة موضع المحاجم من الرقبة فعليه دم عند أبي حنيفة رحمه الله وقال أبو يوسف محمد رحمه الله صدقة. If you shave the areas where you're going to do hijama, right? So many people, before they do hijama, they shave, right? That area, for example, if they're hairy, right? They would shave it, right? And so in that case, you would have to if it's a large amount, then you must give a dam, and if it's a smaller amount, then according to the more correct view, you should give a dam. You should give dam, but according to our other opinion, you should give sadaqah. So the more correct opinion is that you give dam. Right? Similarly, the same rule applies if you shave your underarms, for example, or your private area or something else, right? In that case, you would have to give dam. Okay. So وإن قصر أظافر يديه ورجليه فعليه دم. If someone trims the nails of his hands or his feet and his feet, then he must give dam. Right? So you cut all of your nails. In that case, you must give dam. If you cut one hand or one foot, you must also give dam. Okay. Again, same concept of 1/4 is essentially considered the entire thing. Right? That's the kind of a rule, right? That إقامة الربع مقام الكل. That's how they kind of they justify these rules, right? That 1/4. That's why if you shave 1/4 of your head, you have to give them. Similarly, if you cut the nails of 1/4 of your limbs, which is one hand or 1 foot, then you have to give them as well. وإن قص أقل من 5 أظافير فعليه صدقة. Anything less than 5 fingers, صدقة. Okay. وإن قص أقل من 5 أظافير متفرقة من يديه ورجليه فعليه صدقة عند أبي حنيفة وأبي يوسف رحمه الله. Okay. And if you cut 5 fingers, but from different fingers and toes. Now this person is probably, wallah alam, maybe it's a genuine scenario. It could be, wallah alam, right? In that case, you'd still only give sadaqah. You'd give sadaqah for every single nail that you cut. So if you cut, sadaqah for this finger, sadaqah for this, and so on and so forth, right? For each finger that you cut, you have to give sadaqah. But if you cut one full hand, like my right hand, the entire right hand, I have to give them. Okay. And if I cut, let's say 4 fingers, I would have to give 4 sadaqah.
What is ruling for biting?
Yeah, biting is the same concept. Same concept. Essentially, removing. You are intentionally removing your nails.
Practice me.
Yeah, I know, but still, you're still removing. Whether you bite it out or you use a nail clipper, it's still removing. So, for example, it's simply if you pluck your hair or you shave it or you trim it, same thing. It's just more of like the prohibition of taking out those parts of your body.
I think he's talking about somebody who habitually.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, so there are people like that. There are people who have, sometimes women, especially women, they have like some bad habits like this, where they bite on their fingernails, which obviously, I mean, men too, but I mean, we shouldn't do it, right? Okay. Let's wrap up inshallah. وإن تطيب أو حلق أو لبس من عذر فهو مخير إن شاء ذبح شاة وإن شاء تصدق على 6 مساكين ب3 أو أصوع من الطعام وإن شاء صام 3 أيام. Okay, so this is, for example, someone who is fulfilling or doing these things, but they have a reason. So someone applies perfume or they shave or they wear clothes, but there's a genuine reason. Right? There's a genuine reason as to why they're doing this. Okay, so it's not that they just want to do it, but there's a genuine reason behind it. In that case, they have the choice. Right? They have the choice. Either they can sacrifice, they can give the dam, which is sacrificing a sheep, or if they want, they can give sadaqah. Right? They can give sadaqah, and the way that they have to give sadaqah is sadaqah on 6 poor people. Basically 6 sadaqatul fitr. Let's just say, keep it easy without translating literally. You can give 6 sadaqatul fitr. Okay, so 13 times 6, whatever that number is, right? 16, 70 something riyals, right? Or 80, whatever it is. And the third option, وَإِنْ شَاءَ صَامَ 3 أيام. Now, again, so you may say there are people who they have udhr, but they also don't have money. So in that case, they can fast for 3 days. Okay, they can fast. So instead of giving a dam, they would fast for 3 days.
What is the difference between dam and sadaqah?
Dam is sacrificing a sheep or goat and so on. Sadaqah is just sadaqah, like 13 riyals. Okay. We'll do a couple more very quickly, inshallah. وَإِنْ قَبَّلَ أَوْ لَمِسَ بِشَهْوَةٍ فَعَلَيْهِ دَمْ أَنزَلَ أَوْ لَمْ يَنزِلْ. Right? Now, this person, okay, we'll stop here, inshallah, at the end of this one. But basically, someone who has relations with their spouse. من جمع في أحد السبيلين قبل الوقوف بعرفة فسد حجه. Right? So someone who has relations with or someone who kisses their spouse and then they release. Right? In that case, they would also have to give them as well. Right? So in the book here, he mentions that whether he releases or not, right? But in reality, there are other opinions which are a bit more lenient, right? Imagine if you kiss your spouse, of course, intentionally, or you touch your wife intentionally, and you're aroused, then according to this opinion, you'd have to give them, whether you release or not. But there are other opinions that say that no, you have to, there has to be a release, which makes more sense. It's a bit more lenient, and it's it's not as difficult. Otherwise, you would not be able to go near your wife. Okay. And so then the one who has relations with his spouse before they go to Arafah, then the entire Hajj is gone. Right? So if you have relations with your spouse before Arafah, your entire Hajj is gone. وَعَلَيْهِ شَاة. At the same time, you also have to sacrifice a smaller animal. وَيَمْضِي فِي الْحَجِّ كَمَا يَمْضِي مَنْ لَمْ يَسُدْ حَجُّهُ. And also at the same time, he must continue the Hajj as like the other people who are continuing their Hajj. Right? So again, this is and also number 4, وَعَلَيْهِ الْقَضَاء. And number 4, he must do qada of that Hajj. Right? So again, someone who has relations with their spouse before before Arafah, in that case, the entire Hajj is gone, and they have to sacrifice the animal, and they have to continue on with the activities of Hajj, and they must make up this Hajj because of that. Generally, most of us, I mean, like we go for a very short trip anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But imagine like someone who's traveling long distances, and obviously, it's much more difficult for that. وليس عليه أن يفارق امرأته إذا حج بها في القضاء عندنا. Right? And it's not necessary for him that he separates from his wife in Hajj, according to us. Right? Now, this is the more correct opinion, that you don't need to be separate from your wife. But if someone is like fearful that, if I'm with my wife, I may do something, in that case, then they should, stay a bit some distance from your wife. ومن جامع بعد الوقوف بعرفة لم يفسد حجه وعليه بدرة. Right? And the one who has relations with his spouse after Arafah, in that case, the Hajj is not cancelled, or the Hajj is not broken, but he has to sacrifice a big animal. Right? Again, he did Hajj, but he didn't do Tawaf, right? So therefore, he has to sacrifice the big animal. ومن جامع بعد الحلق فعليه شاة. And then the one who has relations after shaving the head, but again, he didn't do Tawaf yet. In that case, same thing. Right? He has to sacrifice a smaller animal now. So you see how it's getting less and less? If you have relations before Arafah, Hajj is destroyed. After Arafah, before shaving, big animal. If it's after Arafah and after shaving, but before the Tawaf, right, then it's a small animal. Okay. And then lastly, we'll stop. Let's stop here, inshallah. We'll stop here, inshallah, regarding Hajj, inshallah. We'll talk about if someone accidentally has relations with their, not accident, but if someone intentionally has relations with their spouse in Umrah, we'll talk about that as well, inshallah, next week. But there's a lot more. There's a lot more to mention, and so I'm not going to take too much time tonight. It's already late, and so therefore, inshallah, we'll stop here. Any questions before we end off?
And you said that you can shave by yourself your head.
Yes, you can shave by yourself.
Is it allowed same person can do, or it has to be someone else? Meaning, I can do my own shaving after I've done everything.
Yes, you can shave your own head. Yes, you can shave your own head, and you can also for others as well. You can also shave for others as well. Okay. All right, we'll stop here, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan.